is there a part of you that's not so sure you want to enter into this work because you have a feeling and you have a sense that there is a lot of stuff trapped and lurking in your system, and you're not so sure you want to deal with that stuff? And it's a completely valid concern. Hello, it's Irene here. It is the evening, and I wanted to share something that I read in a book. It is so connected with this whole nervous system regulation work, healing our traumas, healing our old wounds, something that I've been reflecting on, and I'm going to share that first. So hello everyone. As many of you know, I've been doing this work, this specific healing trauma work, nervous system work, as a somatic experiencing practitioner, someone who works with early trauma, developmental trauma, all the things through my teachers since about 2008. And that's more than 10 years. And one of the things that I have started to reflect on is how when I got into this work, I was clueless, absolutely clueless to what was stored in my system. And there is that saying, ignorance is bliss. You know the one? There's something oddly comforting to know that I got into this work having no idea what I was in store for, because I got into the work of somatic experiencing, Peter Levine's work, all this stuff, not for myself. It was to work with my current clients in the realms of the Feldenkrais method, and also my career. I was a fitness trainer and exercise physiologist. So I was already working with people in 2008 for about 10 years. I started in 1997 when I was in university, working with people, helping them move better, function better, exercise, better nutrition, all of that. And so I went into the healing trauma work for my clients, not for myself. But what occurred, of course, and this is a story I say in many places and spaces on my YouTube channel, and the quick version is I had no idea how much functional freeze I was in. I still remember the day that one of my SE providers looked at me in the eyes and she said, Irene, you've been in functional freeze your entire life. And I took that in and I never denied it. I knew deep down she was right. So that might be the first thing of this quick talk, is really see if you can own up to the survival physiology that you might be starting to learn has been your protective mechanism. Because there's something about having that awareness and really owning it, not playing victim to it, but saying, yep, that is how I lived and how I survived, and that's what got me through all these things, and now here I am. And then, of course, figuring out, what do I have to do to work with this stuff? So back to the original piece that I mentioned was, I didn't know what was in my system lurking. And a lot came out. And I would say I'm pretty much over the big humps, and I'm still working and tweaking on a few things. But I can pretty much say I think I have reached actual regulation of my nervous system. But this only really dropped in over the last 4 or 5 years, really in the last, I would say, 3 years. And I know that because my symptomology has shifted and changed. I didn't know what was in my system. Many of you, whether you're here watching this on Instagram, maybe we put this up on YouTube, wherever it goes, whoever sees this, you might, depending on how much you've learned from me, you might have more knowledge about your nervous system and what's possibly trapped inside and what it takes to heal than I did when I started this work back in 2008 to become a somatic experiencing practitioner. So you see the issue here? There's a bit of a conundrum, because now that you know what potentially might happen as you start to uncover, there is now a knowledge and awareness of, I don't know if I want to go there. Irene's been talking about the chronic pain she's been in for the last 10 years, the skin rashes that have come out of her body, the inability to push and override the way I used to. So here I am saying, yeah, there's some weird benefits to functional freeze. You don't feel the pain. You don't feel the override. You don't feel the stress. But of course, as we know, when that stuff is in us, if we don't work with it, we will get sick. Something will break down because our nervous system is not working at optimal repair, recovery, rejuvenation, rest, digest. So you might be in a place, and please let me know in the comments below, whether it's this live video or under a video that's when we save this, like, is there a part of you that's not so sure you want to enter into this work because you have a feeling and you have a sense that there is a lot of stuff trapped and lurking in your system and you're not so sure you want to deal with that stuff? And it's a completely valid concern. So I'm just saying this makes sense. So I want to have this conversation and start having this conversation, I think, more in 2025 and beyond, because I've been doing this now online for over 10 years. And I started in 2012 with my courses online. And I want to ensure that y'all are not stalling yourself, resisting, sabotaging your own health for the sake of worrying about what the journey might be like and how bumpy it might be like. I hope that makes sense. So I was reading this book, back to my first statement when I popped on live. I was reading this book that someone gave me. It's called The Eden Project: In Search of the Magical Other, a Jungian Perspective on Relationship, written by James Hollis. So this is just two little paragraphs on the first chapter, page 31, and it's so appropriately titled, The Lost Garden, Acquiring a Sense of Self. So he writes, no one enters the therapist's office. Now, of course, I am not traditionally a therapist, I'm not a psychotherapist, I'm not a psychoanalyst. I call myself a practitioner, nervous system practitioner, a scientuitive practitioner, but it's the same thing. I used to be in private practice, so people would come and see me. Of course, as I know, and as I'm about to share here, people only come and see me. They would only come and see me when they were in absolute agony. Chronic pain, neurological disorders, can't move, can't walk, horrible IBS, can't sleep, panic disorder, all this stuff. So what I'm about to read might ring true for those of you who work with people, or maybe you are in this boat right now, or maybe you haven't reached to this level. So he writes, no one enters into the therapist's office whose adaptive strategies are still working. Right? So nobody goes into the therapist's office when their adaptive strategies are still working. One enters therapy precisely because they have failed. One finds oneself making self-defeating choices in spite of the best motives, suffering the reoccurrence of primal wounds, such as abandonment or overwhelm, retreating before the insurgencies of the self, whose displeasure is expressed in depression, phobias, addiction, and the like. Dragged, as it were, to face oneself, one is forcibly positioned where the self may be heard. Next paragraph. This encounter, which Jung called a word I can't pronounce, I'm not even going to try. It's a German word that starts with A. So the encounter which Jung called this word I can't pronounce, and the Greeks called metatonia or metonia, brings a change of orientation through which a new sense of self may emerge. And this is the good part, or this is the truthful part. None of us who have gone through such sea changes has ever volunteered. We were dragged there, kicking and screaming, and no doubt we will be dragged there again. I'm going to read that one more time. None of us who has gone through such sea changes has ever volunteered. We were dragged there, kicking and screaming, and no doubt we will be dragged there again. I read that the other night, and I went, wow, that is a statement, because it's true. And there are certain things that we take care of before things break down. One might keep their car tuned up. Most of us, I think, brush our teeth. But there's certain things that we can kind of get by with. And it's like, I'll look at that later. I'll work on that later. My digestion isn't so good later. I'll do that later. I can't sleep so well. That's okay. I'll sleep later. This relationship is nagging me. Oh, later. This kind of thing. So we know this. Humans, we're so good at waiting until things are so bad. The good news is we actually have a lot of capacity to rewire. We have a lot of capacity to heal. We have a lot of capacity to rejuvenate. Not everybody has that luxury. Some people get to that rock bottom and they try to heal, whether through allopathic or alternative, and it's just too late. The heart is too far gone. The tumor is too far metastasized. The neurodegenerative condition is too far gone. The mental illness, which we know is connected to our physiology, is so far down that we cannot cope to stay alive anymore. All these things. So I guess my question to all of you would be, if you're not at that rock bottom yet, what might it take to start this work now so that you don't hit that rock bottom and you don't have to be dragged kicking and screaming? I think for so many of us, our childhoods and how we were raised in we would call it the Prussian education system, rote, repetition, discipline. No one wants that, right? We are dragged to that kind of education typically. Some kids love it, but I think the kids that liked that needed control. They needed something that they could control because maybe their lives at home were so out of control that being that good student and following orders was really good for them. And we know this. I know from some of the research I've been introduced through in my trainings. A lot of the people who join, at least in this case, the US military, do so because they came from broken homes and there was no structure, there was no containment. So what do? They go to the place where they will get structure, they will get containment, they will be told what to do, when to wake up, when to exercise, what to study, when to be deployed, all these things. And that's a whole other story, because then you have those people go into combat and they're more dysregulated to begin with, and that leads them to higher levels of PTSD, et cetera, et cetera. But that's a story for another day. So if I come back to this thesis that I wanted to share with you from this book about how typically as Jung, or this person who studies Jung talks about, we typically do not come into this work of therapy or working with self and really working with self until we are at a place of existential angst. And we don't know what side is up, we don't know where we are in space, and so we have to figure it out. So I wonder, what would it take to work on this stuff before we get to that, right? Before we get to that. And I think this is where we have to dig deep into our soul and into our legacy as human beings on this planet of ours, which is called Earth. We have to dig deep. And we have to, in many ways, sacrifice our momentary our momentary worries, our fears in the moment for the bigger picture. I don't see any other way, because I can tell you guys till the cows come home, if you don't regulate your nervous system, the studies, the ACE study, the research suggests we will get sick. We will have something that goes wrong in our body system, in our psyche system, if we don't work on this. We know this, right? And I feel like that is sometimes still not enough to convince someone, to help someone get on the track of healing and working with their nervous system. I worked in fitness for many years. I quit working in that fitness world, that industry, because it was so difficult to get people to show up from their internal desires to exercise. It never worked. It never friggin' worked. If they had a plan and they had consequences and they had me disciplining them, you know, I'm paying this person $60, $50, $100 an hour to train, I will show up, because if I don't show up, I'm going to lose money. So people would show up, but it was a consequence. The way that I see my students who really get into this nervous system work, when they really get regulated and they really start following their impulses, there is this inevitable desire to want to move and be more active and more fit. I have seen it time and time again. People start to eat better, they start to make better choices, their addictions change, their relationships change, and of course, most importantly, their relationship to self changes. And I think, again to this book, it's about In Search of the Magical Other, a Jungian perspective on relationship. I'm only a chapter in, but I got this book because someone had suggested it around how we tend to seek out new and exciting relationships when we're in secure relationships. It's like we're always looking for something better, something new, something different, something exciting. But really, how can we stay in that primary relationship and nurture it? Now, this is, of course, in context of a partnership, husband, wife, spouses, etc. But when it comes to you, a big part of this nervous system work is developing a relationship to yourself. And most importantly, a relationship to the environment. That is one of the biggest linchpins I have found wherein the work I teach through my courses and programs, it has a lens, a deeper lens. This is where my Feldenkraisian work comes in how we relate to our awareness with the environment and our sensory contact with our environment. This is how we learn as babies. We learn about ourselves through how we move, how we crawl, how we taste, how we touch, how we see. We can't just be in a bubble as a baby. We have to be connected to the outside world, usually through our parent, but very much through the world around us, the extraceptive world. So part of this nervous system work that is a little more abstract is coming back to that relationship to self, but also to the environment. And we are beings living in this environment that is Earth. And I know many of us want to take care of this planet, and we want to make sure this planet, the planet's going to survive, I think, no matter what. But we are the ones that have to impact the survival of this planet. And if we can work with ourselves and see the bigger picture, I do think we can inch ourselves forward to a much better place here on planet Earth. So I feel that it's important for me to state this obvious of, I get it. I get why for many of us, we procrastinate. We have the resources at our fingertips. Heck, maybe you've even bought all of my courses and you haven't started any of them. I get it. And how can you consider shifting the perspective and looking at the bigger picture and making a contribution to our livelihood as humans, as collective humans on this earth? Seems a little more bigger, a little more macro, a bit more, it's harder to touch, but I just wanted to offer this insight, this spark, this reflection from reading this book the last week, as I also watch my students. We just finished a round of Smart Body, Smart Mind. It was our 16th round. We are going into holiday break with my SPT students, my Scientuitive Practitioner Track students. I'm watching them grow and develop and really work and face these gremlins, if you will, that are lurking still in their systems. They're working on their stuff and really helping guide them to keep showing up, even though it might be tough, it might be hard, and asking that question, like, why am I doing this? How can I contribute to the greater whole? How can I work towards making the world a better place, as cliche as that might sound? The Eden Project, In Search of the Magical Other, a Jungian perspective on relationship. So far, everything in the chapter that I first read is connected to how we were treated when we were young. So for those of you well-versed in this work, maybe you're students already of mine, it's very much connected to what was our primary attachment, who was there, who wasn't there, and how that first moment in life, those first few years of life, how that was created, will create the rest of our life. And if it wasn't that great, life's going to be difficult, and it'll be difficult and continue to be difficult until we work on it. It comes back to what he said about how most of us don't end up in therapy until we know something has badly gone wrong and we have to fix a problem. So this stuff doesn't change with time. That is something that we do know. We know that this nervous system, at this core autonomic nervous system level, it doesn't change with time. I've written about this. I've talked about this. You can be in the most optimal, pristine, clean, non-toxic living environments with tons of love and connection. Oddly, I have seen that is still not enough. We need to understand these deeper levels of our nervous system physiology. We need to do specific exercises, workings to rekindle these basic core tenets of connection to self, connection to our viscera, connection to the environment, and learn how to take ourselves out of survival stress. That is exactly what I teach in my programs and courses. I am teaching you guys through these lessons, these audios, these trainings, how to relearn how to be in your body from a regulated, resilient nervous system perspective. So I credit, of course, Jung. He was one of the people that started to talk about this back in the day when it was weird to, have therapists and all this. And now it's just common knowledge. And I feel like we're at that next level of realizing, okay, therapizing is great, and we have to get into our physiology. We have to get into our body. It's not enough to just meditate and clear our mind. We have to work with the survival stress, and it can be tough. And so there's this need to accept that this is going to be tough. That's okay. And then how can you look at the bigger picture and know that you might not see the full effect of this in your lifetime? And that's the tricky part, right? You might not see the full effect of the efforts we're putting in our lifetime. But it's the same reason one might have children and make their lives better when your life maybe wasn't good as a kid, but you want to make their lives better so that they can live better. And usually, hopefully children survive their parents, and those parents don't see how that child has kids of their own or creates goodness in the world, grandchildren, all these things. They don't see it happen, but they work darn hard to make their kiddos' lives better. And so that's how I want to consider, or have you consider, seeing this work for yourself. You're working on yourself, yes. It takes time, yes. And it is a bigger sacrifice in some ways for the community at large. If you haven't checked out any of my things, now is a good time to do so. The best resource that people have said is still my Healing Trauma video series. It's a 3-part series. It goes through theory, it goes through base level physiology, it touches into some of the research, some of my analogies that really hit home how our nervous system gets dysregulated and then what it takes to heal it. And on that series, there's also a short 20-minute neurosensory audio exercise so you can practice some of the basic nervous system health basics that I teach in my drop-in classes, and really form sort of the foundation for how we do this work. All right, everyone. Thanks for listening to me. We will see you next time.